Thank you for attending this stream. Um, and thank you for listening to my somewhat probably atypical contribution. Because I'm not a policeman and I'm not referring to all kinds of police experience. You introduced me, so I don't have to say anything more. Today we talk a lot about globalization, and I think of globalization as a set of phenomena, and more as globalizations, plural, and studied by different academic disciplines, and some very highly specialized in fields of, for instance, finance or politics, technology, law, or climatology. And all these disciplines deliver data, and more data. And some disciplines try a more inclusive angle, broad enough to behold the big picture. And I believe such a discipline is human geography, which is what I taught for many years in secondary education. It's a multi-interdisciplinary field of study, avant la lettre, and in many countries it's part of standard curricula of general education. I believe geography may be relevant for police education too. My interest is an educational one. In vocational education, like police education, we need to be specific about what we teach and what we examine. And I believe that global awareness, or maybe you could say global literacy, global imaginaries, should be part of what we teach. I address this as a global sense of place, which may sound a bit contradictory, because we know the words sense of place, but I will talk about a global sense of place. I prepared on the occasion of this conference, I prepared a paper. It's much too long to read and to discuss, but I hope to interest you to read it and take a copy and maybe have some sort of reflection on what I wrote. It's in places where people work and where people live, they construct their views on being in the world, their sense of place. I believe that a local sense of place may well be compatible with a global sense of place. Instead of a focus on roots and belonging only, people may shift focus to roots, fed by their own cross-border travels and relations, for instance, or by the ethnic diversity of local society or local business, or by global retailing or the media. Possibilities to develop a global sense of place are nearly unlimited these days, but what global dimensions and issues people in fact do carry in their hearts and minds may differ largely. Globalizations may generate curiosity and creativity, international involvement and solidarity across borders, but globalizations also may be perceived in terms of insecurity, of risk, a lack of fixity and stability, and lead to fear and anxiety and even to xenophobia, radicalization and violence. The term globalization itself is young, it's a buzzword. It boomed in the late 1990s and the first decade of the 21st century. Right from the start, it was a very contested concept. Is it only about the global economy or about other issues too, like migration, geopolitics, global warming, the rise of China or the United Nations, or technology? Is it all about the further growth of sameness or also about diversity? I believe that globalization is not the great equalizer some speak of. Although a thin layer of globalization cannot be denied, the power of place is still dominant and very difficult to escape from. A specific point of interest in studying globalization is work. Long-distance relations and transactions exist for many centuries. Trade was and still is the main motive. People needed and still need to bridge gaps between cultures, languages, political and legal systems, seeking for mutual benefits and operational practice. Reciprocity was a guideline in many of these relations, far more important than pillaging, looting, or raw domination. A community of practice emphasizes, like any community, the social identity of people, their specific knowledge, skills, and competencies, their commitments and their material interests, more or less like the European guilds of the Middle Ages. If communities of practice operate on a global scale, they are not cosmopolitan, but focus on specific challenges and problems, often highly operational, instrumental, or technological. Communities of practice are, by definition, not confined to moving through the vertical scales of the local to the national and further to the international. They operate horizontally, reaching consensus laterally, and this makes them part of globalization. Dutch society has been oriented internationally for many centuries. Traditionally, a very important part of the national income is earned in international trade. Most Dutch people are aware of this, and I believe the Dutch education system can be thanked for that. Knowledge of the world and language skills are important assets of Dutch people. When geography was introduced in Dutch education, it was a time of intense transformation, coming from an era of colonialism. The age of imperialism took off and enabled by far better mobility and communication. World markets emerged, literally with far-reaching consequences. It's no coincidence that education boosted in these days. Nation-states like the Netherlands needed educated people who would serve their duties well in the rise of industry, transport, and imperial administration. In the 1990s, the people heard about globalization. They heard about the end of history, or the end of geography, and the so-called spaces of flows. And new questions were asked, like, what is the Dutch nation state if it's not a territory? What about the traditional distinction between domestic policies and foreign policies? Gradually, such questions led to a reorientation of government and a reorientation of Dutch police profession. According to Saskia Sasse, state institutions keep delivering state services. Gradually, however, they are becoming denationalized. Think of the Dutch Central Bank, the European Central Bank, or the IMF. What is Dutch about the Dutch Central Bank? Isn't it just one of the nodes in a global network of financial institutions? Sassen elaborates a view on denationalized state institutions working in highly specific networks with great autonomy, difficult to monitor or control from a democratic point of view. These national institutions apply new organizing logics, not founded in national frames anymore, but in global networks and global institutions that hopefully aim to contribute to the pursuit of justice and not merely political order. One major state institution in transformation is the Dutch National Police, the Dutch police, I must say. Next year, 2013, the National Dutch Police Force will have its take-off. This, to my opinion, may be interpreted as a major response to forces of globalization. From its early days, the police is positioned within a domestic framework. Foreign state relations were, and for the major part still are, taken care of by diplomats or by the military. Although Holland, as a society, turned global in the 1960s, 1970s, and for some time even became a hotspot in hippie culture, the orientation of the Dutch police for a long time maintained to be domestic. In 2005, the vision document Police and Evolution emphasized the need of nodal policing in the network society. Although not everyone understood the concept geographically, nor globally, it exemplifies a shift of focus. I believe, rethinking recent history of the Dutch police, globalization has been a major factor, which I understand as a process of reorientation towards global agendas and systems. Key institutions like the police need to learn to act on the international stage and develop global imaginaries on public order, criminal law enforcement and justice. They need more autonomy, more mandates, but also new ways to stay accountable. The Dutch police is traditionally governed vertically by state and sub-state authorities and controlled by the institutions of democracy, parliament and city councils. So when the police, like many other trades and professions, increasingly starts to work and to learn horizontally, far across Dutch borders, where does that leave accountability, democracy or ethics? I believe answers should not be found in formal structures only, but also in an upgrade of the abilities and professional judgment of the individual police worker. I believe further professionalization should include global issues of policing and standards to cope with these issues, fair and professional. Global and local should not be used as a binary concept, like us versus them, or in versus out, all with an excluding tone. Global is not the opposite of local. Most of all, it refers to abilities, to zoom in and to zoom out, to see and to understand, and to act fair and adequately. We do, however, have to admit that some, maybe most, policemen and women at the moment may have problems to see in the distance. Until now, police professionals are programmed to look at the world domestically. So when Dutch policemen and women develop a global sense of place, can we thank police education for that? With due respect to initiatives taken already, still far too little. The products of police researchers sometimes do touch upon global issues of safety and security and the global-local dimension, but overall with far too little impact on police education. I believe we should rethink the content of police education at all qualification levels, and also we should look into professionalization programs. When issues of global policing are addressed, like human trafficking, it's discussed almost always in an instrumental and fragmented way, without much reference to the big picture. Maybe a geography of policing for policing can contribute to a more inclusive and global sense of place. Thank you.